I was having a conversation with somebody, and they were almost confused. They were like almost mad and frustrated at his friend that couldn't see things the way he did. He's like, I mean, I don't get it. He could do so much more. He could do so much better. He's not taking care of himself. He's not seeing things this way, that way. And, when I was younger, I saw the same thing. And as time has gone by, I don't know if it's been more experience or wisdom or, the surrender piece or all of the above. And I've realized you can't make anybody change. I think for us, there was a moment that, for some of us, there was a moment that clicked. Just like when you got an addiction, alcohol or smoking or drugs or anything, that at some point, enough was enough. You knew better. You've seen all the commercials. You've seen people lose everything. But one day, that last cigarette just clicked. You always knew that you smelled, but they had to click and nobody could make it for you. And it's the same thing in life, in every aspect of life. Drinking is the same thing, at one point you just realized that I had enough, and in the way that we think in our lifestyle is the same. Some of us get frustrated because other people don't see it. They see it. They see it. We can't change anybody. We can't teach anybody to care enough to change. We could inspire people. I try to set a standard and to represent a possibility and possibilities. Because growing up, I just didn't have a whole bunch of people that I saw that did well in life doing the right thing. It's we're adaptive animals, so innately we know that if we adapt to our environment, we survive easier. And our environment, it's not always great, and we're taught to follow, not to lead. And when we are taught to lead, we're taught to lead within the confines of our environment. So I like to represent an idea, to represent possibilities that you can be gung-ho on life and on, doing the right thing and moving forward and working hard. Today I saw something that said that never in his life the man has seen anybody be successful at a 40-hour work week or less. And that made sense to me. Again, that represents possibilities. And it's been a long time since I've worked 40 hours or less. Once in a while, once in a very, very blue moon, it happens. But that hasn't been the norm for me to get to where I am. So at some point you got to realize, and we got it. I'm a big believer that we know everything we need to know, but that doesn't activate execution. And because the norms are the norms, we believe that that's what we should do. Krishnamurti said, it's no sign of great health to be well adjusted to a sick society. That's always, hit a nerve. That's how I remind myself of that. and I stand up myself most of the time, and that takes a lot of pressure, that takes a lot of weight on your shoulders, but it also creates freedom, and freedom for the necessity to for anybody to agree with you and to follow you, and but those that matter, see me as possibilities, see a standard that I'm setting. And we're a little bit of everyone that we come in contact with, so I take that responsibility serious, and I try to make sure that I am that standard. Now, do I call it like it is? Many a times, absolutely. I'd rather hurt your feelings than not be honest most of the time. But at some point, I realize I'm just pestering you. I'm just pushing you away, and I don't need anybody, in my corner. But many times I weigh the benefits and set my ego to the side, that representing an idea, representing possibilities, representing a standard that is not the norm near you is more important than my ego proving that I'm right and you're wrong. So at some point I'll shut up for your benefit, because I don't want you to lock me out and walk away, and for you not to get the benefit of being around someone with a standard that represents possibilities, that represents an idea that you may need to be around, because eventually when that execution point comes into play, you become a little bit of that. And not only for you, but for so many people to come. I gotta set my ego to the side, and nobody could have ever changed me. And I did. I walked so many ways wrongly throughout my youth. And many people talked to me. It wasn't like if I was in an island that nobody cared. Many people cared. I had, family members, I had preachers, I had, godly people, I had good people. Many people try to change me. Many people try to show me a different way. The fact was that I knew better. But that ignition to execute a different way had not been cultivated, had not taken place. Were the seeds there? Likely. But they weren't ready to sprout. They weren't, nobody could water those seeds. Nobody could go cultivate those seeds. Nobody can harvest that seed. Maybe they can cultivate it. Maybe they can't water it. But it's like the Chinese bamboo tree that you plant, and in 5 years it doesn't grow an inch. But in that 5th year, it grows immensely. And the question is, did it take 5 years to grow that bamboo tree, or did it take 1 year? And no, it takes 5 years. It takes 5 years to cultivating, of watering, of fertilizing, of, in my example, it takes that time of representing an idea, representing possibilities, representing a standard, and eventually, maybe, no guarantees, something ignites inside that person, not because of the outside, but inside that person. And they execute and they harvest. And change comes to be, but it has to come from that person. The best we could do is be a great example and, make sure they know, make sure they see, and, make sure that they understand that the suffering is going to happen regardless, whether you live a great life, whether you make hard decisions, or whether you don't. I love that video that says choose your heart. Diabetes is really hard. Being sick is really hard. Divorce is really hard. Being unemployed is really hard. But so is, having a great diet. That's hard. Having a great marriage, that's hard. Working, 70, 80, 90 hours a week, that's hard. But life is going to be hard. Choose your heart. I'm a big believer that if you put the heart in your life, life will leave you alone. But if you don't choose to do hard things, life is going to put some hard things not of your choice. And that usually takes us by surprise, and that usually takes us down. That's where depression and addiction comes into play, and divorce, and so many more negative things. I choose to do hard things on purpose, intentionally, and I'm a big believer that life looks at me once in a while and it's like, he's doing hard enough. Don't push people away because your ego wants to prove that you're right and they're wrong. Sometimes if you care so much, you just need to be an example and represent the idea, the possibilities, and the standard that you believe would be good for them. I think that is much more important than you proving them wrong and making them feel like they're no good. Love ya.